Hi, and welcome to a new episode of Don't Be a Man About It. If you like this episode, I would encourage you to share it with your friends and tell more men about it. We are here to raise awareness and to support as many men as possible with their mental health. Having said that, my guest today, he is a filmmaker, and his films are created specially to raise awareness on mental health, and he is a trauma survivor and the Hope Ambassador. Eric Christiansen, how are you?
I'm great, thank you, and it's an honor to be here. And good evening and good morning here.
Thank you. Yes, it's 7 a.m. your time. So, Eric, how is your heart doing today?
How's my heart doing? Wow, that's a good question. You know, gosh, it's a little bit, it's buoyed, but it's a little bit conflicted. It just I have three kids, and one finally went back east back to college, and then another one came home, and it's just the constant emotional ride of raising kids and saying goodbye, then having them back and seeing their changes and accepting their changes and their maturity, but also kind of wanting that 7-year-old back. So that's where I'm at with that. It's just part of that. It's part of that journey, and it's a real honor to be able to be a dad there. And that's one of my main roles, along with being a filmmaker. And then on the filmmaking front, you know, uh, with my new film Unmasking Hope, my fourth personal film, and as you said, my films focus on trauma and trauma recovery. It's actually grief recovery, and it's about the hope after traumatic incidences. And but Unmasking Hope is sitting there in my edit suite, and we have 95% of it shot, and I'm going into this edit coming up here in this post-production, and we have about 5 months left. And it's what I've done since it's all I've done really since second grade is make films. And so when you're kind of thrust into a situation where you're like, okay, really enjoy this.
Yeah.
This is 5 months of your life where you do what you were made to do. And then, on a lot of podcasts, they've asked me, what am I going to do after? I don't know what I'm going to do after this film, and so it's a little bit, it's extremely exciting, but I also know it's just such a huge undertaking, and I want to surpass my personal best on my last film and make a really special film. And I know it's there.
Yeah.
It's just it's actually already exists. I just need to bring it out. And so that's where my heart is. That's a great question. I love that. So family and parenting and my calling, that's where my heart's at. And
That's
it's
beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you, Eric. At the end of the day, I do
yeah.
believe whatever we put our heart into, we create more magic and we create more unbelievable and remarkable results.
Yeah, I agree with that. And it sounds real great. And that, you have all these sayings, say, follow your heart and everything. But the other side of that great sign, and why everybody doesn't follow their heart, is there's a lot of bumps in the road and pain, you know? And and to get to that side, there's things that are thrown in your way, and there's things that you have to overcome personally to produce things and follow your heart and be the true individual. It's not all roses, and that's okay, because I've learned I'm learning that along with the good parts of everything and all the joy and happiness or whatever you get out of something, that there's the trials and the pain to go through. And in a way, if you can accept that the same way you accept the trials, then and say, hey man, I'm really living because of this. I've I've decided to become a parent, well, 24 years ago. And but also accept not just all the amazing things, graduations and all that, and seeing them grow up, but also accept all that stuff that comes with it, the conflict and just guiding them through. And if you accept the tougher stuff as being part of it, in a way, almost celebrate it, it makes it, and that's kind of where I'm at, trying to do that and do that with the film and everything. I kind of went on a left turn there, but I think I like the subject, so.
Please go on. I'm so enjoying how your answer is basically taking a lot of turns, but at the same time, it's like, I've been speaking to you for like, what, 10 minutes now, and you speak in a way where you take someone into a movie. So I feel like I'm watching a trailer, only that I'm listening to it. So I'm loving it. Thank you.
Oh, good.
Take your time. So, Eric, I watched the trailer. I think you sent me the YouTube link for Unmasking Hope.
Yes.
I got a lot of emotions. I have to tell you, I'm a movie freak, just to let you know. And I got a lot of emotions watching that. And I do feel that Unmasking Hope could be one of the educational tools that it has to be in schools, it has to be in universities. I got that vibe while watching it. I want to know the story behind it.
Wow, the story behind Unmasking Hope. Well, number one, just to hit on the universities and things, all my films end up migrating into institutionalized use, and that's a real blessing, and that's really one of the things that got me hooked. When I did Faces in the Fire over 30 years ago, about my recovery following a fire disaster and losing my house, and I followed these other survivors in the hope afterwards. It not only won my first Emmy Award, but more importantly, actually, to me, it was picked up by the National Institute of Mental Health, and it was put in their catalog to help train counselors that were coming into disaster situations. So my films have this ability to continue on and institutionalize what you would call institutionalized use.
I felt it was like a legacy.
And so, yeah. If things don't be a man, so I'm gonna open up and tell you about my doubts and things here. When you say that about the film and see the trailer, I'm like, what trailer is she watching? Okay, because when you get so close to it, you're like, do I have it here? Am I making the movie I'm supposed to make here? And but anyways, the story behind Unmasking Hope, it's a fourth in a line of my films, and it's a progression. And originally my first film, like I mentioned, was Faces in the Fire 30 years ago. And then you have to understand, in between all these films, I did dozens of national commercials. I've done IMAX movies. I've done Discovery Channel, the Navy SEALs, all this stuff, but nothing like close to my heart and my calling. These are the 4 films that I'm talking about are my personal films that I put everything into, that are my calling. It's beyond filmmaking for me. So the first film was Faces in the Fire, about the recovery after a disaster. And then almost 8 years later, I did Homecoming: A Vietnam Vet's Journey. And I followed a good friend of mine on a motorcycle run across the United States from California to the wall of Washington, D.C., and 300 other Vietnam vets on motorcycles. And it was a healing pilgrimage. And there was a huge catharsis for him about working through his trauma from the war and things like that. And that was my first piece with veterans. Then another 8 to 10 years later was Searching for Home, my last film, Searching for Home, Coming Back from War. And that was, I expanded that. What I found out is all these Vietnam veterans were essentially telling the same story about their healing. Core, deep down core, we all heal the same way. It's just like getting a scratch or something. It's going to scab over. It's going to have these phases. And I believe God set up a way for us to heal in a similar way mentally from trauma and grief. And so with Searching for Home, Coming Back for More, I expanded that idea. I had veterans from all generations. I had World War II veterans. I had Korean veterans. I had female veterans. I had the guys that are coming home now and a female veteran that had just come home. And so I really mixed it up, and I call it my thesis. This aggregate of all these people with these different experiences, they end up telling the same story. Yeah. And so hence, now to answer your question, Unmasking Hope is a logical extension of that. But instead of just mixing up the genders and the race and the ages, I've mixed up the different traumas and the different incidents. So this film has, male, female, whatever, all different races, but it has all different traumas. So it has 9/11 survivors, it has mass shooting survivors, it has first responders, it has a child Holocaust survivor, and they're all telling their stories. Now, why I didn't say they're all telling the same story, I really hope they are, because there's going to be a moment in my edit suite when I'm working on this, hopefully, like there was with Searching for Home, when I watch it roll out and I'm watching the first cut and I go, oh, it worked again. Yeah. All these people are telling this beautiful story, even though they're so different. This Holocaust survivor's telling, and I can already see hints of it from the interviews. I mean, it's amazing to talk to a mass shooting survivor than talk to a 9/11 survivor that happened 20 years ago, almost now. And they're kind of telling the same story, even running away and losing their shoes. This thing, both these women, that one was a mass shooting survivor, one ran from Tower 2 in 9/11. They lost their shoes when they're running in this insane chaos, and it's just beautiful. So my idea with Unmasking Hope is I wanted to take that idea one step further, that we really do heal all the same, no matter the gender, race, or the trauma. And so that's where that really came from. And I'm in the middle of it now and crossing my fingers. And actually, I don't cross my fingers. I just know that there's a divine presence that's trying to guide me into telling the right story. And they will all be telling this beautiful same story, because it's the same way we can relate from across the ocean or on the other side of the world, and we can talk about feelings, the same way we can relate when we talk about trauma, because we're all human, and people forget that. And this divisiveness that's going on now, even in your own family right now, we have tension in our family about certain things. And it's like, get over that, because we're like family. And, we're like family, you and me. We're humans, and we like, a good friend of mine, he's a musician, and he has this great song, and it's kind of a throw off line in the song, but I keep thinking about it. He just says, you know what, we all want love and something good to eat.
Oh, that's so true.
Isn't that great? I think we all want love and something good to eat. If I came over tomorrow to your place and I brought something great to eat, we'd be like, yeah. And we'd have this connection. So anyways.
That's beautiful. Usually trauma survivors, they could be triggered easily. So how are your movies, or maybe how is your story, could be a trigger to people watching it or to people hearing it, and what's next after that?
Oh, so we're talking about triggers in the films?
Yeah.
Oh, that's something I'm very, very careful about, because
and
that's a great question,
right?
That's a really good question, because with Searching for and Coming Back for More, there's 3 parts of my movies usually, and the one part is the truth, And the truth is what happened, the incident. The next part is the healing. And the healing, it could come 50 years later in some cases. But the healing is when the individual discovers there's other people like them. It's like, oh, me too. Oh my gosh, there's other people like me that have survived. I'm not crazy. All these thoughts I have, I'm not alone. And then that healing, that's the start of the healing. Then they start like whatever. It takes so many different modalities, they say, of healing. There's so many different ways. And then there's the hope. And so the hope is, for me, defined as, obviously it's a hope of a better life, but the ultimate hope is when you get so far in your healing, you go back to the beginning of the line and help the people in the truth. So why I'm mentioning this part is, and having to do with triggers, is the truth is what most movies are about. It's about the incident. The hurricane was terrible. Look at the hurricane. It was huge. And all these people were displaced. And then at the very end, they have some people going, oh man, I hope we can rebuild. And then that's the end of the movie. Well, my movies don't end there. That part of the incident is the part that can really trigger people. So when I first had the first cut of Searching for Home coming back from war, the truth part of everybody, the incident that happened to everybody was like almost a third of the movie. And I'm like, no, that's not going to work. We can't have that because people don't want to see it. Outside people want to see it. They want to see the car crash, but most people and the people involved, and they don't want to see, they know. And so we have to congeal that down. And so my work is taking that whole thing about the truth and making it as small as possible. You know, the part about 9/11 in my film, Unmasking Hope, we're not going to tell the whole story of everything that happened. You know, we're going to try to make it this big, and then we're going to tell the rest of the story. We're going to tell how she found the healing, what happened afterwards, that trial, all that stuff. That was 18 years, well, 19 years now, afterwards, and talk about the hope, talk about the healing and the hope. So I'm very careful not to dwell on the incident and not to show things that are provocative in that way either, because my films aren't sensationalized that way. You know, it's very, very sensitive with the mass shooting. I don't know how really I'm going to cover that in Unmasking Hope, but I'll be giving away. But the most important part of that journey is this beautiful thing that we do with the survivors. We have two of them in the film. Is instead of like focusing on the fact one was in two shootings, believe it or not, she survived the Route 91 shooting, and then she was at borderline. And what are the odds of that? And she was in another mass shooting, so she survived two shootings. But the main thing with them, and what people will walk away with, is not the fact that they were in a mass shooting. It's the fact that they walked through this process of painting rocks. One of the things you do, the survivors there do, is they paint rocks to memorialize that incident. And they were never, ever going to go back to Vegas. And we had the honor of being able to go back to Las Vegas with them, take those rocks to the memorial garden, which is so important to have memorials. No matter what it is, if you've lost somebody to cancer, if you had a serious, whatever has happened in your life, to build your own memorials or have a certain place you go to memorialize things. But we took these rocks back to this beautiful Route 91 memorial in Las Vegas, and they placed their rocks there. And that, it just, I don't know what it is that releases so much from painting a rock and then taking it there. I mean, we chose the rocks with them. That was part of the process. And I gotta tell you one really cool thing. We're on the beach, and I told them this is a very spiritual beach. This is a very special beach for me. We went way out of the way here in California, way up north of Santa Barbara in Los Angeles, and we're at this really kind of remote beach, and everybody's like, wow, this is a special beach. And they're going around looking for the rocks. You know, the camera was there. It's more important that we work with the people and they're working through their thing. But the camera was there. It wasn't for the camera, it's for them. So we're looking for rocks and stuff on this beautiful beach. And my producer goes, oh my gosh, there's dolphins out there. And
Oh,
I'd been at this beach a lot. I've surfed my whole life there because I'm a surfer. And I look out there and I've never seen this, but this dolphin was jumping out of the water like 10 feet high and doing loops and like landing back where everybody could see them. And I'm like, if that's not a sign, come on. So anyways, I give really long answers to questions.
no, thank you. That's the beauty of it. The purpose of doing all of that, I want people listening to resonate, to get the right knowledge, because I have came to realize for the past, let's say, 10 years, people have mixed definitions, or let's say wrong definitions of what depression is, what trauma is, what how to talk with, let's say, a suicidal person, how not to do. They do not know all of these information. And as a suicide survivor, I attempted suicide 3 times and losing my dad to it. And I have a lot of friends who are trauma survivors. I just want people to be more educated in that area. So the longer your answer is, the better, because at the end of the day, I am here to serve, and you're helping me do that. So thank you.
Well, it's interesting on how to talk to survivors.
Yes, I was just going to ask you, because what
That's
are the do's and the
I've
don'ts?
talked to dozens and dozens of survivors and of all sorts of different things now.
Yeah.
And I've had the honor to accompany 2 amazing men back to like major memorials. One's a Vietnam vet I went to the wall with. One's a first responder that ran into Tower 2, literally, right before it collapsed and got pushed back by the collapse of it. I was able to walk the 9/11 memorial with him, but that's great stuff. But all these people I've talked to, and I call it holding space.
Yes. Yes.
I create this, you really don't have to talk.
Yeah.
The more you talk, the worse it is. It really is. And at first it's very tough to force yourself to be there and hold that silence. But there's a way to do it where you're almost like hugging them and you're not. And it's just, if you have a friend or a relative and they're going through a suicidal bout or a depression, it's like, please don't say, no, I know how that feels, because you don't. But you can go, you know what? I'm really, what is going on? And just open up, like, and then don't worry about like getting your next word in, because it'll happen naturally. And you hold this space and create this space around you. Imagine creating like a beautiful, whatever you love, creating a little nice warm place on the beach around you guys, and whatever it is, and you hold that space. I tell my crew members, and I choose them really carefully, because we have circles, kind of like, how close do I want these people to our participants, and fortunately we have an amazing crew right now, and it's very small. But I tell everybody that comes in on our crew that the individual and the person in the film are the number one thing. Being transparent and comfortable with them is the number one thing, and it's amazing how the right people show up for my crew members and how appropriate some of them are. I think about our, I hope she hears this. I think about one of our production assistants. We started working with Stephanie out of New York, and I ran an ad for a production assistant in New York. And it's interesting because I get a certain kind of letter from the people that want to be there. They're drawn to it. They know that there's something they're going to get out of it personally, and maybe heal themselves by being involved in our work. And Stephanie was like that. And man, we had another guy that sent me a similar one in LA. Unfortunately, he had to go back to Indiana, where his parents are because of all this COVID stuff. But man, he was so appropriate around the people. And being appropriate means, you don't ask a lot of like questions, you're just kind of there for them. And if they open up and they start speaking, then you kind of lead them into and really be transparent. For me as an interviewer, I have to be transparent. I have to like let my guard down and be able to be vulnerable with them. And that's one of my greatest honors, with Sandra Lee. She was a Iraqi veteran, and she's a little Korean woman, and she's absolutely the cutest thing. And I can't imagine her toting around an AR like, but she's badass, and she did her job. But she also suffered military sexual trauma, and under the hands of one of her superiors. And I was honored to like hear her story, and she opened up, and I was one of the first males to hear this story, and that's an honor, and it happens because I become vulnerable with them, and it's my honor to hear their sacred story, because everybody's story is the most, when they're telling you their story, it's the most important story to them, and it's sacred to them. And so to be able to be given that story is very sacred. So when you're talking to your friends and they want to open up or something, and you create that space, it's a really sacred, special time for somebody to open up about their feelings with you.
Yeah. Cool. You want to slow down? You want to take a breath? I don't know why. I feel like no. You're good.
No, yes, I am. That's exactly what I'm doing. I'm centering a little bit, and I feel this is very nice. I like the where we're going with this. It's great to be able to talk about the finer points of what I do. There's not many people that really, other outside of my circle, that are really hear this. So it's kind of cool.
All right. I feel a lot of emotions. And when you mentioned that when someone wants to share their story, it's the most important story of their lives, that's so true. But how, what are the, I know there are a lot of do's and don'ts and challenging or unique challenges when speaking to someone as a trauma survivor. But what are the basics? Whether it was for their families or partners or maybe colleagues, how can they go back to their normal lives, but also to feel normal? Because I know that there's no going back, and the only way to move forward is actually, as you said, to heal at your own pace and to just hold the space. But how can other people, not as a trauma survivor, how can other people behave and help and support a trauma survivor without making them feel bad about it, without triggering them, without actually ruining even the friendship or the relationship? Because sometimes when you don't know how to act with someone, you just pull back. I don't know how to help, so I'm just going to pull back. And that would make the trauma survivor feel worse.
Well, that's a great question. It's very complex question too. Is and I'm not an expert. I work with some amazing clinicians, in my work, and but I'm not an expert on something like this. But one of the most important things is normalcy, and trying to maintain a modicum of like normalcy, and not being so, for me, I've been in recovery from drugs and alcohol for 30 years. And one of the things that really bugs me is when I come into a room is when people, do you mind if I drink? Oh, well, what about this? And they get all weird about that, and it becomes a subject. It's not a subject. Go ahead and do what you do. It's okay, because it actually is more of a trigger for me when it becomes like a big deal. Anyways, it's a miracle. My obsession has been lifted, and it was lifted over 30 years ago. But and I imagine that's why I use my personal recovery as kind of a sketch of what it is like for others. So if you make a situation out of it, how are you feeling? You okay? And doing this whole like thing, it really makes it like way worse. And you're like, what? We used to just hang out, why is it now this way? And it is for kind of, remember, the person's soul is still the same.
Yeah.
You're still with that same soul, that same person that you really enjoyed being with. Something's just happened to them, but they're still the same core. So, imagine that. Look through what happened to them, and be like, oh my gosh, we're back together hanging out again. This is freaking awesome. So let's go do this. Let's go, let's go bake a cake, because we always used to bake together, or whatever, and it's just like, some people think they need to like bring it out so they can talk. That's not it. It's called to me, it goes back to holding space. You create an environment and a place, and if they want to talk about it, they'll bring it up, and but if not, then normalcy, that's just my personal thing. I'm not, as I say, I'm not an expert, but bringing some normalcy to it, and loving the person. What's that?
Did you get the normalcy while you were going through your trauma?
For me, here's the funny thing about my trauma, is losing my home wasn't the real trauma. It wasn't. It's what I did to myself afterwards. It's where I was already an alcoholic. I already didn't drink. I drank abnormally. And it's where I went afterwards, and what I did to myself afterwards, that was my trauma. It's the drinking, the self-pity, and the place I took myself in that bottom, that was my trauma. So, it was very, very difficult to be around me after that. But the woman that's my wife now, gave me, and we talked about this before we came on. She gave me this guy's card, Don R, and said, and she did it so beautifully. She said, if you're tired of doing what you're doing, then you should call this guy. He doesn't drink or do anything, and he's a cool, happy guy. I'm like, man, what, really? Okay. Because I was done. And that's all she said, and gave me this guy's card. And I went to go see Don R. And, I was, I ended up going to an outpatient, and that was great. But I got introduced to a program for living that changed my life. And that's what I still do today. But, I've kind of lost track of what I was saying, because I got into this whole recovery track. I'm so sorry. But that's how my recovery started. And then creating normalcy after my trauma, that's I had to find a spiritual solution. And slowly but surely, nothing was the same after that. And nothing was the same after the fire. Nothing was the same after I stopped drinking, but that became my new normal, and became an adventure. And I got to remember that, because it still is, parenting is an adventure. All this, as it goes back to what I was saying before, the good and the bad.
Yeah.
But so
Well,
that's where
thank
I
you.
take that
Thank
one.
you for sharing. And I'm happy you're here. And
Thank you.
so the new normal, how long did it take you to accept your new normal? Because you were telling me that one part of actually healing or fully healing is when you accept the bad as much as you accept the good. How long did it take you? Who helped you to accept this new normal? Did you go to therapy? Well, or only it was your wife or their sponsor? How did you go through it?
Oh man, for me, it's kind of multi-level. I mean, I have my groups, and I have a lot of other fellow alcoholics that
Yeah.
I connect with. That's really important on a group level. It's very important for me to hear their stories. But I think, for me, and then it's important at a certain point, I think I was about 5 years sober, then I started helping other guys. And that was really important
Yeah.
to like pass it on. And that's the hope, as what I define the hope, and working with other guys and being their mentor. And I'm honored to have, a few guys that I'm doing that with right now. But here's the crazy part about that is they end up helping me more than I'm helping them. And it sounds such a pat cliche, but when you're trying to walk somebody through what you've been through and you try to help them, and then you hear yourself saying the same things, you're like, maybe I should implement some of those things a little bit more in my life also, you know? And then the teacher, the student becomes the teacher, and but it's the willingness and being open to that experience. And the idea of don't be a man, it's a very vulnerable place, it's just not being the expert on everything. You're guiding somebody through it, but you're not the expert on everything. You need to like remain humble enough that you can hear something from them and learn from them, and then your life becomes way fuller. I think a lot of men, especially men my age in their 50s, get set that everything they do is kind of right, and it just kind of, but that vulnerability of like being able to be teachable is key to growth. I was talking to my sponsor. I guess we'll just call him my sponsor. I try to remain semi-anonymous on these, but I was talking to my sponsor, and he's 84 years old and has 55 years of sobriety, and but he's a humble man. And one of the things we ended up talking about is I'd rather kind of seem like a bumbling newcomer, even though I have 30 years or whatever, than to be an expert on everything and not be able to learn. I'd rather be a bumbling newcomer and be able to seem that way and ask questions and be able to learn. But with that comes, I guess, a dent in your pride. And, it's the same with parenting. I want to be the expert and tell all my kids exactly what to do, but I'm not always right. And I have to accept the fact that maybe I do have some fallibility in things. And then that makes it a little bit more real, I think it increases connection. But going back to men my age and mentorship and everything, I think that's one of the most important things that you could possibly do, because going back to how, I get to a certain point, my life is kind of trying to find normalcy. That's what my goal is. I don't know if I'm ever going to find it. The closest thing I can feel normalcy right now is I've gotten into stand-up paddleboarding. And when I'm paddleboarding by myself on a really beautiful day, everything goes away. It's like paddling out into the surf when I'm sitting in the surf. But going back to like life, but I need help. I need help to find that normalcy. I need a mirror. I need somebody that can see me clearly that can speak into me. And so, I help others and I'm open to them giving it back to me. And then I have my mentor and I let him speak into me. And I've done that for 30 years now. And I have had no reason to go back to the way completely back to the way I was, or take a drink or use a drug. And because of that, and God, I mean, he's my ultimate shield. So,
Is there any
but
specific? Yeah, please go on.
I just can't say enough, about watching men my age, watching them leave their families, watching them chase cars, drugs, booze, their job, money, man, if somehow you can just get a sage, find yourself a mentor, a man older than you that's already done all that stuff and messed it up and he's fixed it, that can speak into you, I think it would solve a lot of turmoil that I see in families and men my age. And I thank God for the other men my age on my path, and I thank God for the guys I sponsor and my sponsee. But
That's quite
man, I look at it.
interesting point that you just highlighted, which is men your age, which means that's another whole generation. When they go to drugs or when they go to alcohol or let's say unique lifestyle, they're trying to fill a void or they're trying to fill a gap.
Oh, definitely. And that gap is, for me, through how I see it, and maybe other people see it differently, it's a spiritual malady. It's a hole that can't be filled. It's a God-sized hole, is what they say. You're looking for some sort of spiritual fulfillment, and I'm being very vague on the spiritual part for a reason. I'm not going to go out and like say this is the right God, this is what you should do or something. I think we all reach that through different ways, but I think we all as humans have a need for some sort of connection that way. That's my personal belief, that I do believe strongly, but it goes back to what you were saying, filling that void. Man, a new car, even though it's a $150,000 car, isn't, or more, which I've seen, it gets old, but to be able to be semi okay with yourself and to have some sort of connection, I think it doesn't get old. And for certain people like me with obsessive personality and the ism, alcoholism, it's not wasm, they say it's an ism, and more is always better with me. It just, nothing is enough, of this earth. It's like, I can't get enough of certain things, and so I have to substitute that with a connection, and that connection comes in a million different forms. It is God, but it comes through my sponsor, it comes through my groups, it comes through my family, it comes through me occasionally feeling okay with myself, it comes through me getting my big old body out there on my board and paddling out, it comes through my paddle boarding, it comes through just time with my wife, when I'm not worried about what I'm getting.
Yeah.
which is it's like one of my sponsors used to say, me, I, me, I. And that's the way we get. And so anyways, and let me tell the listeners, I am far from perfect. If my wife came in here right now, she would tell you that. But man, I really do try. It's the willingness.
Who is?
It's the willingness.
You're perfect just the way you are. And the next day would be more perfect. No, this perfectionism that people chase from from people I work with, it doesn't exist. So you're perfect just the way you are, and tomorrow you will do better. No.
Oh yeah, and it's funny. You hit it on the head. It doesn't exist, and it's just like, oh man, it's just, yeah, it just doesn't exist because we try so hard. There's in one of my books, there's an analogy of the actor, and the actor is like now become the director, and now he's the lighting guy, and he's moving the lights, and he's telling people what to do. And if only they would behave the way he needs them to, everything will be okay. But there's just too many moving parts. That's not going to happen, and everything won't be okay. So acceptance becomes the key to all my problems, and acceptance is not defeat. People
Wow,
get that
that's
really
good.
mixed up.
Yeah.
you know it's like, this is the way it is. This is the way God intended it to be. And people have a real hard time with that. But we change the things we can, and then we accept the things we can't change, and then we pray for things to change, that we would like to change. And somewhere in all that becomes a place that we can be still and achieve a little bit of normalcy, whatever the heck that is. But the other day we were someplace, and I was just doing all my stuff I do, and my wife is like, "You're so weird," and I go, "Oh my gosh, really?" And she goes, "Yeah." And I go, "Thank God," because I'd be really worried if you ever thought I was normal.
Yeah. Well, I think we will be weird with us. Eric, thank you so much for being here.
Well, this is great, and wow. I mean, I guess I was fairly intelligible so early in the morning, and went well, I think.
You did really great. Like, thank you.
Great.
I
Thank
when
you.
I get people on my show and it's really early in the morning, I ask them, "Are you a morning person or you're not?" I don't want to be asking too many questions.
Well, I'm kind of 50-50 on that. It's when I get into a mode, I become a morning person. But honestly, when I'm working artistically, I don't start rolling until about 3 o'clock in the afternoon.
Mm.
Then I'm like, oh, okay. So I kind of plan my day accordingly to like get mechanical things done. And then by about 3 o'clock, then I can make some more creative decisions.
Thank you. Anything else you'd like to
Well,
add?
thank you. What's that?
Anything else you'd like to add?
Oh my gosh, we just, we covered it,
Yeah.
and I'm just really happy that we were able to talk about the mentorship, because I think, and it's very difficult. It's difficult to ask for help. It's difficult to be, you know, a 50-year-old man, and say you're semi-successful and stuff, but your personal life is falling apart or whatever. To ask for help is not easy, and I understand that. If you go to some sort of church, ask a mentor there. If you have another friend, ask him, just to, and be real honest. Say, hey, I got some rough spots. Can we talk, get coffee? Because I've been watching you, and I kind of like how you handle things. And I really believe if men did that all over the world, um, it would just take a little bit of the edge off. It'd sand that edge that you bump into that's like a little bit sharp off, and not only that, but that momentary reduction of pride to ask for help will turn into feeling a little bit better. And as you said, I like what you said, and my sponsor says this: we just try to be a little bit better each day. And
Yeah.
tomorrow I'm going to be a little bit better version of myself. And we're always we're always the last to notice that. But that's my goal. And that's, my final thought is just find somebody you respect and ask just for their ear and see what happens.
I like that.